Ladies and gentlemen, our program will be commencing shortly. We invite you now to take your seats in the ballroom and switch your communication devices to the silent mode. Thank you.
Good evening. Presidents, Prime Minister, Excellencies, distinguished guests and delegates. Welcome to the 23rd IISS Shangri-La Dialogue. On behalf of the IISS, let me say what a pleasure it is to see you here and that you've made your way to Singapore to conduct defense diplomacy and help address security challenges in this region and beyond. The Shangri-La Dialogue is an idea that was born 25 years ago, and the first meeting was convened just a year later in 2002. Throughout this time, the IISS has enjoyed the unwavering and exceptional support of the government of Singapore, for which I am very grateful. At its core, the Shangri-La Dialogue is a platform for governments to find common purpose, to focus on the security challenges that trouble the region, to imagine solutions, and to generate the will to pursue them together. Achieving this is hard at the best of times. As the IISS Asia-Pacific Regional Security Assessment, which was published earlier today, points out, these are not what one would call the best of times. In fact, the pace, the scope, and the intensity of security challenges has increased, and governments have to direct ever-growing attention to their effects and strategic implications. The Shangri-La Dialogue is a forum where policies can be explained and presented, where differences of perception and approach can be discussed in an open environment, where transparency can be turned into a building block for understanding each other and for engagement, and where the impact of advanced technology on international security and conflict can be understood. These are the goals the IISS pursues through its regional summits, be it here in Asia, in Singapore, or in Europe, where we will convene the Prague Defense Summit in the Czech Republic in September, or indeed in the Middle East, where we will meet at the end of October in the Kingdom of Bahrain for the Manama Dialogue. With the Global Security and Innovation Summit we will run in December in Hamburg, Germany, we also provide a forum dedicated to the intersection of technology, innovation, and security. And this evening, we are privileged to hear from His Excellency To Lam, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam and President of Vietnam. His keynote address at the Shangri-La Dialogue comes at a time of enormous turbulence and heightened uncertainty, the consequences of which are felt around the world. Vietnam is emerging as a strategic actor, and we are all looking forward to hearing from you, Mr. President, and learn how Vietnam might work together with partners for greater stability, security, and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific and beyond. His Excellency To Lam was re-elected as General Secretary by the 14th National Congress of the Communist Party of Vietnam in January this year, and in April he was elected as President of Vietnam. And the combination of these two roles provides a very strong mandate indeed, and the foundation for Vietnam to step further and for the President to speak on Vietnam's foreign and security policy choices in these complex times. To Lam has already outlined an ambitious agenda of economic growth and has set a target for Vietnam to become a high-income developed country by 2045. His diplomatic agenda and travels this year have included important visits to Laos, to Cambodia, to the US, to China, to India, to Sri Lanka, and to Thailand, and he will have another stop after his visit here. So this will continue. Vietnam celebrated its 30th anniversary as an ASEAN member last year, having joined in 1995. And I wanted to point out that it was under Vietnam's chairmanship in 2010 that the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus, the ADMM Plus, was inaugurated, a point to note here in the setting of the Shangri-La Dialogue. And Vietnam enjoys the trust of major powers and can build on the support it has across ASEAN. And I'm certain that the keynote address this evening at the Shangri-La Dialogue will be an important moment to continue to give shape to the international ambitions of Vietnam under your leadership, Mr. President. The President will deliver his remarks in Vietnamese. You have interpretation devices at your seats if you need them. So now is a good moment to turn those on. Following the speech, we will have time for a small number of questions from the audience, which we will group. And I encourage you to think of points you would like to raise, and we will make sure a microphone finds you.
Your Excellency Lawrence Wong, Prime Minister of Singapore, the host country. Dr. Bastian Jejeric, Director General of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, International Institute for Strategic Studies, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the Government of Singapore and the IISS for the honor of addressing at the opening session of this very important forum. For more than 2 decades, the Shangri-La dialogue has evolved into a premier platform for regional security exchange where nations share perspectives, listen carefully to one another, and seek responsible pathways towards peace, stability, and development. We meet at a time when the world is confronted with multiple risks and uncertainty, more connected, yet more vulnerable, more technologically sophisticated, yet more exposed to misuse, more deeply interdependent, yet increasingly susceptible to pressure and coercion. While all nations continue to speak of peace, stability, and cooperation, the strategic environment is marked by growing lack of trust, fragmentation, and unchecked competition. Therefore, what we need to forge in advance is a shared vision, essential no matter how minimal it might be, to safeguard peace, trust, and development for humankind in the 21st century. At the same time, we must strengthen our capacity to prevent crisis early and from afar, as experience repeatedly reminds us that many major crises begin with misunderstandings left unresolved, signals wrongly interpreted, and preventive mechanisms not activated in time. It is in this spirit that I would like to share some reflections on the theme proactively shaping peace, stability, and development in a world undergoing profound changes. Ladies and gentlemen, change is a constant feature of international affairs. Whether it is allowed to escalate to conflict or transform into a catalyst for peace depends on the strategic choices by nations and the international community. Looking at today's world, I believe that the current instabilities reflect the convergence of 3 foundational crises unfolding simultaneously and reinforcing one another, namely a crisis of the international order, a crisis of development models, and a crisis of strategic trust. First, the crisis of the international order. The international order is never static. A just order can evolve to reflect the changing realities of the world. Yet, such adaptations must occur through rules, dialogues, mutual accommodation, and self-restraint, not through coercion, unilateral imposition, threats of force, or the creation of fait accompli. The crisis of the international order begins when rules are still invoked, yet the binding force erodes, when commitments are repeatedly affirmed, yet undermined in practice. When fundamental principles of international law are interpreted selectively, applied inconsistently, or subordinated to the logic where might makes right, and the strong prey upon the weak. In such an environment, states, particularly small and medium-sized countries, face mounting pressure to choose sides and are increasingly vulnerable to coercion in the economic, technological, financial, and security domains. At the same time, the very connective space such as the seas and oceans, cybersecurity, supply chains, digital infrastructure, and undersea cables risk becoming arenas of strategic contestation. Recent tensions along strategic maritime routes in the Middle East remind us that conflict at a single flashpoint can rapidly disrupt trade, energy supplies, logistics, and socio-economic life across the globe. Second, the crisis of development models. For decades, globalization, trade and investment flows, technology diffusion, and supply chain integration have created extraordinary development opportunities for many countries, including developing ones. Yet these very engines are now under unprecedented strain. Growth is slowing. Public debt and the cost of capital are rising. Climate change is threatening the livelihoods of hundreds of millions. Disruptive technologies create immense opportunities but also new divides. Trade, finance, tariffs, energy, food, data, and technology increasingly risk becoming tools of pressure. For many nations, development is not secondary to security. Development is the very foundation of enduring security. When development pathways are disrupted, when opportunities for developing countries' advancement are narrowed, economic fragility can quickly evolve into social and political instability and even strategic uncertainty. Third, the crisis of strategic trust. This may be a silent, yet dangerous crisis because it causes states to interpret one another's actions through the lens of mistrust and anxiety. When trust declines, defensive measures may even be perceived as provocation. A difference of interest may escalate to confrontation. A minor incident may trigger spirals of reaction in the absence of dialogue, communication, and restraint. Strategic trust does not require elimination of differences or denying competition. Its essence lies in managing differences within a rules-based framework, ensuring that competition remains bounded, responsible, and predictable. A durable regional order cannot be built upon perpetual fear and mutual distrust. Emerging technologies are making these challenges even more complex. Big data, artificial intelligence, cyberspace, quantum technologies, autonomous systems, and digital infrastructure are expanding development capabilities, yet they also have the potential to amplify suspicion, enable information manipulation, compress decision-making timelines, and increase the risk of miscalculation. When technological advances outpace the evolution of rules and human oversight, strategic stability becomes more fragile. Therefore, overcoming this crisis requires a strategic framework for trust building, one that includes rapid communication channels in times of incident. It also demands transparency, dialogue, substantive information sharing to reduce misperception, clear codes of conduct to prevent collision, and sufficiently robust technological norms to ensure human beings remain ultimately responsible for decisions carrying grave security consequences. Ladies and gentlemen, these three crises are converging most visibly in the Asia-Pacific. This is the world's most dynamic center of growth, but also a theater of intense strategic competition, a region defined by vital maritime routes, yet fraught with risk at sea, a region that benefited profoundly from globalization, yet now faces mounting pressure from supply chain fragmentation, climate change, technological transition, and emerging geoeconomic competition. Precisely because it is where these challenges converge, the Asia-Pacific must also become where solutions emerge. This region shares a common interest in peace, connectivity, and development, and possesses deep experience in multi-layered cooperation. It is where the ASEAN functions as a framework for cooperation, dialogue, and balance, and it does have the motivation and resolve to ensure that competition does not slide into confrontation, that lines of connectivity do not become lines of division, and that one nation's security does not become another's insecurity. It is from this perspective that I would like to offer several recommendations for jointly shaping an Asia-Pacific that is peaceful, stable, resilient, and capable of mitigating risk early and from afar. First, we must make rules and dialogues truly effective instruments of risk reduction. The Shangri-La dialogue should remain a platform where nations listen carefully to one another, clarify intentions, seek common grounds, and manage differences, not merely one for restating position. Dialogue must help identify risk early, facilitate information sharing, preserve communication channels during moments of tension, and prevent disagreements from escalating into crisis. Likewise, a rules-based order does not belong to any single grouping of countries. It is a common foundation upon which large, medium, and small states alike can coexist peacefully, grounded in international law and the UN Charter. with full respect for the independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity, to the non-use of threat of force, to the peaceful settlement of disputes, and to sovereign equality. Rules acquire real meaning only when they are implemented consistently and translated into operational mechanisms such as early warning mechanisms, emergency communication channels, incident management protocols, self-restraint, and verifiable actions. This is particularly important for the seas and oceans. The seas and oceans do not only stand for resources, but they are also the shared space of connection, the lifeline of global trade, energy, food, and supply chains. No country would benefit when these routes become theaters of coercion, confrontations, or displays of power. With regard to the East Sea, Vietnam's position remains clear, consistent, and principled. Vietnam supports the peaceful settlement of all disputes and disagreements on the basis of international law, particularly the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Vietnam respects the legitimate rights and interests of other states while remaining resolute and persistent in safeguarding its own independence, sovereignty, and legitimate sovereign and jurisdictional rights in accordance with international law. Second, we need to shape an open, inclusive regional architecture with the ASEAN at its center. As new mechanisms and initiatives continue to emerge, we need a regional architecture capable of connecting interests, reducing mistrust, and reinforcing existing arrangements. All initiatives that contribute to peace, stability, and development should be welcomed, provided that they are transparent, respect international law, complement one another, and do not weaken ASEAN centrality or turn Southeast Asia into an arena of bloc confrontation. ASEAN centrality is neither taken for granted nor self-sustaining. It can only be preserved through unity, strategic autonomy, and the capacity to shape a common agenda. Inclusiveness must be matched by effectiveness, dialogue must generate action, and consensus must enable timely regional responses to shared challenges. In this regard, Vietnam supports and stands ready to work closely with the Philippines as the ASEAN chair in 2026, together with all other member states, to strengthen peace and security, to expand corridors of prosperity, to advance connectivity, to inclusive and sustainable development, and keep the people of ASEAN firmly at the center of our common endeavor. Third, we must place human security and societal resilience at the core of sustainable security. Instability today does not arise solely from military conflict, but also from fractures in development itself. Therefore, defense preparedness is legitimate, but sustainable security cannot rest on military power alone. Still less can it be built through arms races or by increasing developmental insecurity for others. What we need instead is a development foundation capable of withstanding systemic shocks, one supported by an open and diversified supply chains, by seamless infrastructure connectivity and cooperation in finance, technology, and human capital. At the same time, we must advance practical collaboration in disaster relief, health security, war security, food security, energy security, cyber security, critical infrastructure protection, and search and rescue operation. When cooperation tangibly enhances safety, safeguards livelihood, and improves the people's quality of life, strategic trust is renewed and strengthened. Fourth, we must shape responsible norms for emerging technologies in the defense industry. AI, big data, quantum technologies, autonomous systems, space technologies, cybersecurity, and high-tech supply chains are reshaping international security. These technologies can significantly expand our capacities for development, risk foresight, and governance, yet they can also be misused to launch cyber attacks, manipulate information, automate conflicts, enable unlawful surveillance, or create new forms of coercion. In the defense and security domain, the critical question is not how powerful technologies can become, but the extent to which humanity can retain control over it. We must therefore deepen dialogue on AI in defense and security domain, ensure human beings' ultimate responsibility in decisions carrying grave consequences, develop clearer norms of responsible conduct in cyberspace, strengthen protection for undersea cables and critical data infrastructure, and promote greater transparency regarding technologies affecting strategic stability. The defense industry should serve legitimate self-defense and regional stability, not to fuel arms race. Fifth, We must strengthen societal foundation and resilience, protect information space, and elevate public awareness. In a world of deep digital interconnection, instability no longer stems from conflict, supply chain disruption, or cyber attacks. It may begin from the erosion of trust within societies themselves. Disinformation, information manipulation, extremist incitement, social polarization, and coordinated influence operations can weaken national cohesion, distort public understanding, deepen societal divisions, and accelerate the spread of crisis. Safeguarding peace in our era, therefore, also means safeguarding truth, strengthening social trust, enhancing capacity for strategic communication, educating digital citizens, promoting the accountability of technology platforms, and deepening international cooperation to counter false and malicious information. A society capable of discerning truth from falsehood, maintaining cohesion and amid turbulence, and resisting manipulation by fear, hatred, or distortion provides one of the strongest foundations for stability, for sustainable security. Sixth, we must strengthen the capacity for preventive diplomacy, mediation, and conciliation in the region. Many crises erupt not simply because of conflicting interests, but because the parties concerned lack trusted channels for communication, lack space for de-escalation, and lack mechanisms capable of steering confrontation back towards dialogue. The Asia-Pacific must therefore create preventive diplomacy as a strategic capability, not merely as an improvised response after the crisis has already erupted. We need more diverse channels of consultation, more agile mediation mechanisms, incident contact mechanisms, quasi-formal exchange platforms, and broader confidence-building initiatives linking defense establishments, security agencies, maritime law enforcement bodies, scholars, businesses, and social organizations. The objective here is to create credible diplomatic off-ramps before parties become drawn into spirals of escalation that heighten the risk of conflict. To partners with significant influence both within and beyond the region, Vietnam wishes to convey a sincere message as follows. The Asia-Pacific is an open space, and all countries with legitimate interests can have a role to play in contributing to its peace, stability, and development. The region welcomes engagement that is transparent, responsible, respectful of international law, supportive of ASEAN centrality, and conducive to reducing tension. What the region seeks is neither the mere presence nor absence of any major power. What it seeks is responsible commitment. We recognize that competition is an enduring reality of international relations, but competition must be bounded by law, guided by transparency, and exercised with restraint. Ladies and gentlemen, the three crises confronting our world today are not inevitable realities that we are bound to accept. What matters is we confront them squarely without allowing them to obscure opportunities for action. The crisis of the international order show that international law and self-restraint must be reinforced. The crisis of developmental model points to the need to renew growth drivers in ways that are inclusive, sustainable, and people-centered. The crisis of strategic trust calls for dialogue, transparency, responsibility, and more substantive mechanisms for cooperation. These answers will not emerge on their own. They can only become reality if nations work together to uphold and shape rules, connect interests, strengthen trust, and build practical mechanisms that effectively reduce risks. In a world of undergoing profound change, the challenge lies not only in external instability, but also in our insufficient preparedness to manage risk. What is needed is a shift from passive response to proactive shaping, from merely reiterating principles to operationalizing mechanisms, and from managing crises after they erupt to mitigating risk before they escalate. Therefore, the choice facing the Asia-Pacific today is not competition, no competition, for competition is an inherent reality of international relations. The more important choice is between unchecked competition and responsible coexistence, between division and dialogue, between mistrust and coercion, and a rules-based order and trust. Vietnam believes that our region possesses both the mettle and the shared stakes to choose the path of peace, cooperation, and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, Vietnam understands the value of peace through its own history, and the value of development through its own journey of doi moi and international integration. From that experience, we have come to recognize profoundly that our national interests are intertwined with the peace, stability, and prosperity of the region. Contributing to regional peace is also a way of safeguarding Vietnam's long-term interests. Expanding cooperation, reducing risk, and intertwining legitimate interests are likewise how Vietnam fulfills its responsibility to the international community. Peace, stability, and development are the common denominator of all nations and peoples, but they carry meaning only when translated into concrete actions, restraint in the face of disagreement, dialogue when divergence deepen, cooperation when challenges transcend borders, and the building of practical mechanisms capable of reducing risk in real terms. Vietnam therefore stands ready to work with countries both within and beyond the region to reinforce rules, nurture trust, promote dialogue, enhance cooperation, mitigate risk, and together shape an Asia-Pacific that is safer, more resilient, and more prosperous. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Mr. President, thank you very much for sharing your assessment of that converging crisis of order, development, trust, and outlining your 6 lines of effort to manage risk and mitigate risk. We have now time for a few questions. The President will take them from the podium and address them from the podium. So if I can please get an indication of who would like to ask a question, then we can group 3 together. Okay, I see. Can I please get the first question from over there? Yep. If you can please introduce yourself and ask a crisp question, then we can take through.
Good afternoon. My name is Zhang. I'm from the Iiss Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore. Thank you, Mr. General Secretary and President, for a very interesting speech. I really like your point about the need to build a new development model. And related to that, there have been massive domestic reforms in Vietnam over the past 2 years, from the bureaucratic streamlining to the push to the private sector. I would like to know, how do those changes affect Vietnam's foreign policy, and what role do you envision a stronger and more confident Vietnam in ASEAN and in wider region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take 2 more. I see 2 hands here, 1 and then 2. Yeah, there, and then we move 1 table to the front. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gigerich, and good evening, Mr. General Secretary. I'm Senior Colonel Zhang Chi from China. As we know, China and Vietnam established a strategic dialogue, 3+3 strategic dialogue on diplomacy, defense, and public security. My question is, does this mechanism provide a new approach to promote regional security cooperation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if we can get the microphone, yes, over there, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. President. Emil Hkayem from the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Your country is very exposed to Middle East energy. Can you please tell us how your country is managing the current crisis, what the impact is on your thinking about how to manage your energy exposure, your energy security, including in terms of renewable and perhaps nuclear power? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I have 1 taker for 1 last one, and then I'll turn it over. Yes? Can I get a microphone? Yes?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Benjamin Tallis from Helsing, Europe's leading defense AI company. You mentioned that AI creates new challenges, but it also creates new opportunities. Wouldn't you agree that AI and autonomous systems give countries the chance to actually deliver the combat power they need for deterrence at a new speed? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. President, if I can invite you to address these 4 points that were made on a more confident Vietnam and ASEAN, how that role might evolve. The question from China, using it as a collaboration as a framework for regional security. There's the question on energy security and how conflict in the Middle East might affect Vietnam and how you're managing this challenge. And then finally, to your observation on the need to have human decision-making attached to AI and advanced technology, the point about AI as a technology as a solution to defense modernization and military capability questions. So if I can invite you to answer those questions, please. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the questions that you have provided, and I will answer them in turn. We'll start off with the question from the researcher from the Research Institute in Singapore. Allow me to answer as follows. Vietnam at present is robustly rolling out the streamlining of its apparatus, improving its institutions, and bolstering its national governance capacity, with the ultimate goal being the ability to improve our competitive edge and resilience amidst an ever-changing world. These adjustments do not affect the fundamental foreign policy of Vietnam. Rather, they serve to bolster Vietnam's effort in effectively implementing its foreign policy of independence, self-reliance, multilateralization, and diversification of external relations. A Vietnam with better governance and better capacity will be a more reliable and responsible partner to the region and the world. We also perceive ASEAN as a strategic space directly aligned with ensuring regional peace and security, and we always considered ASEAN successes to be our own. And as I have mentioned previously at ASEAN, this does not aspire to be a hub of power, but rather Vietnam is striving to be an active and reliable partner while bolstering ASEAN's centrality and pushing for an approach of equality amidst challenges facing the region. In the years to come, when the capacity of the nation is enhanced, Vietnam can contribute more to ASEAN and shall work closely with the ASEAN members to ensure that this is a location of strategic convergence when it comes to economic growth, the digital transformation, supply chain security, maritime security, and efforts to narrow the development gap. We believe that a united, resilient ASEAN that can uphold its centrality will continue to be an important foundation in peace, stability, and security in the Indo-Pacific. Moving on to the second question from our distinguished delegate from China. When it comes to the defense policy in Vietnam, we consistently uphold the defense policy of four no's to and not engage in any military alliance, not align with one country against another, not allow a third country to station troops or bases in Vietnam, and not resort to the threat or use of force. There are a great many mechanisms to bolster cooperation, and as you've mentioned, the ministerial level strategic dialogue 3+3 involving diplomacy, defense, and public security. The implementation of this mechanism reflects Vietnam's position of self-reliance and resilience, building upon the long-standing tradition of Vietnam, while incorporating the quintessence of mankind. This has been the consistent factor throughout Vietnam's history of national construction and protection. In efforts to address regional and global challenges in an effective and substantive manner, Vietnam also affirms the need to fully comply with the principles of international law and the UN Charter, pursue peace and mutual benefit, and remain an active and responsible member of the international community. In its relations with China, Vietnam views the 3+3 strategic dialogue as an important mechanism among core agencies in maintaining regional peace and security. These agencies all bring forth very practical values in bolstering Vietnam's relations with China and ensuring and contributing to peace, stability, and cooperation in the region. Moving on to the third question. Perhaps you can repeat the third question.
Was on energy security and how Vietnam manages the effects of conflict in the Middle East on your energy supply. So energy security as a challenge for Vietnam because of current conflict and how you go about managing that.
Regarding this question on the crisis in the Middle East, it not only bring forth an energy shortage but also cause fragmentation in supply chains, among others. With a goal of pursuing self-reliance and resilience, Vietnam has focused its efforts to address such challenges. We are striving to maintain supply chains and reserves necessary to ensure the necessary supply of fuel and energy or electricity, while also diversifying our energy supplies in service of the country's development needs. And we also touch upon the disruption this is causing to supply chains, among others. We have also been proactively responding to these efforts by expanding our market, be it in terms of supply chains, input materials for manufacturing, and export markets as the output for our products. We have also been hard at work bolstering cooperation in such areas as logistics to meet new demands. We have been able to thus fundamentally maintain our manufacturing activities, attract foreign investment with ever greater quality and quantity, while also ensuring sufficient export and import activities without much disruptions. These are some of the outcomes in Vietnam's efforts to tackle the challenges brought forth by these crises in the Middle East. Of course, these are initial steps undertaken to respond to this crisis. However, as it continues to persist, it will continue to pose greater challenges, not only for Vietnam, but also for the broader region and the world.
If I can ask you to offer your thoughts on AI and advanced technology as an opportunity and not just a risk to be managed.
I would like, thank you for this last question. AI is a new technology with tremendous advantages, bringing about changes in manufacturing and in governance, among others. Of course, it does pose its share of detrimental issues. And to this end, Vietnam believes that the need for human decision remains important, especially in terms of defense and security. Human decision shall continue to bear significance in such technologies, especially with AI. Second, in the protection of essential civil infrastructure, such as seaports, cable healthcare, and other essential services. AI has also contributed to the development of and the bolstering of said efforts. And third, there's a need for transparency, sharing of information, and building of trust through dialogue based on voluntary principles and relevant technical standards, leading to the establishment of consensus when it comes to the utilization of these technological advancements in manufacturing, in defense, in military activities, among others. So these are my answers to some of these above questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, General Secretary and President, for your keynote address to the 23rd ISS Shangri-La Dialogue. It is 8:46. We shall begin the dinner now. And let me invite you to offer a final round of applause and thank our speaker. Thank you very much.